Welcome to another Drive Time Dialectic with me, TC, host, founder, originator, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment podcast, MBRR Media, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment Media. I'm thankful that everybody's tuning in, watching this, whether it's on replay or live. You guys, your support means a ton to me, and I can't thank you enough. AVA, yes, you're first. We know you're always first in line. So I hope that you guys will share this out, that you will help me push this out, that you will pay attention to the story and understand why these things are so important to me and so near and dear to me. AVA, if you could, since you're here, if you could go to Minnesota State Statutes 169.17, Minnesota State Statute 169.17, copy it, or copy the link to that and put that in the chat. That would be great. We'll also work on putting it in the body of the video description. So yeah, it's Minnesota State Statute 169.17. We're going to start off with a little bit of a conversation about that. I feel like we're covering old territory, but it's become drastically relevant as of late. And I'm sick to death of having to talk about it. And yeah, so anyway, big shout out to all of my show producers. I'm Mav from Subscribestar. Folks, if you want to get away from Google through YouTube support and you want to support me, you can go to Minnesota Black Robe Regiment on Subscribestar and pick a level of support there. Otherwise, if you're channel members here and you want to up your channel memberships, we would be thrilled to have your support as channel members and at a different level. And if you've never been a channel member, now is the time to do that. We would, I would love to have more channel members. It's very important, and it helps everybody keep everything going. I know, and there are hundreds of thousands of places you could go to support other content producers, and I appreciate that you could and that you had to make decisions. I don't know what it's like to have a tight budget, to be low on resources. So don't ever feel like I'm going to be upset if you can't support. But liking the channel, subscribing to the channel, sharing the content of the channel, sharing out this particular video, all of that's going to help. I very much appreciate it. Thank you to the Angry Vet, who has done just a massive amount of gifting of channel memberships to countless people. I've lost track of the number of people that he has gifted memberships for. And while he has never asked for anything in return, I would strongly suggest, if you haven't checked out the Angry Vet and his content, you should go over there and check that out. He is a phenomenal veteran and a phenomenal fighter for truth and liberty. And I have my anonymous show producer. She knows who she is and what she's done. And I cannot thank her enough for what she's done. So, my good friend AVA, check out his channel as well. He is putting the body of Minnesota State Statute 169.17 in the chat. And the reason that this is important is that it makes it very clear that law enforcement is allowed to speed. They're allowed to violate traffic codes under certain circumstances when it's warranted. And it's very clear it has to be when it's warranted. But that being said, when it's warranted, then there are certain stipulations that they have to follow. And you'd think that the easy part of that would be driving with your emergency lights and sirens on. And the problem is that that's like I said, the easy part. That's the actual easy part. The part that trips most people up about that 169.17 is not that they have to have their emergency lights on. It's that when you tell people that having to have your emergency lights on does not, emphasis on does not, make it okay for law enforcement or any emergency vehicle for that matter, but let's just say in particular, who are we most used to seeing? Law enforcement. It does not make it acceptable for law enforcement to drive without due care and caution, to not drive in a way that is conducive to the safety of the people that they are supposed to be protecting and serving, right? And that's incredibly important to this conversation. So we had this conversation starting almost a year ago. We're just shy of 1 year of the homicidal maniac Trooper Shane Roper, who slaughtered Olivia Flores on May 18th. So, so we're, coming up on that tragic incident, on that tragic anniversary. And his excuse was that he was responding to a speeder. And it's actually, and I'll have to show you guys that area pretty soon. It's a ridiculous argument that he was making, that he was responding to a speeder at 80 plus miles an hour on a surface road in traffic. But anyway, and I pointed out then, and I have continued to point out, how I have video after video after video of law enforcement from all agencies in southeast Minnesota driving in violation of 169.17. Speeding, weaving in and out of traffic, not running lights, not running sirens. But the more important aspect is not just that they have lights on, but that they also be driving with due care. And AVA, like I said, is putting that in there, and you can see that it says right in that state statute that having lights on and running sirens does not excuse bad driving. It doesn't exempt any member of the law enforcement career field of the institution of policing in the state of Minnesota from driving with the safety and well-being of the general public in mind. Now, the link to the story that I'm going to tell you is going to be in this description, but I'm not going to hone in on the names of these juveniles and the innocent older man today. Well, what we're gonna focus on is that on April 9th, it was a Wednesday, at about 9 p.m., Minnesota State Patrol in Sherburne County, Minnesota, received 911 calls indicating that there was an individual driving the wrong way on the highway. So, traveling in the wrong direction of travel in a particularly directed lane of traffic. Now, this individual then proceeded to turn in front of another vehicle from the wrong lane of traffic into another lane of traffic, where he was then T-boned by a vehicle driven by a 17-year-old man. 17-year-old man. Fortunately, there was one minor injury, and that 17-year-old man, it was his brother, that had a minor injury to his eye. They got out and did the Good Samaritan thing, and they checked on the other driver to make sure that he was okay. Fortunately, everybody was fine. Nobody had received, any injury that was immediately, shall we say, pressing by way of having an emergency medical response. Now keep in mind, 911 calls have already been made about the wrong way driver. Shortly after the accident, as the young men got out to check on this older man, I believe he was in his 70s or 80s, they got out to check on this older man, and shortly after that, and it was dark, they had their lights on, everybody was as safe as could be under the circumstances. Minnesota State Patrol Trooper I just learned his name, so you have to forgive me. I just learned his name. It's in the title of the video. So a Minnesota State Patrol Trooper came upon the scene of the accident and hit the 17-year-old man with his squad car. 17-year-old man with his squad car. And it was Moses, something like that. The trooper's name. Not only did he hit that 17-year-old man, but then he also hit another vehicle, which then pushed that vehicle into that 17-year-old man's brother, further injuring him, further injuring their passenger, further injuring the man who had been driving the wrong way on the road, which caused the T-bone accident in the first place. Now, some of you bootlicking, statist simps are going to say to yourselves, well, it was the old man's fault for driving the wrong way on the road. No, it was not his fault. Now, did he drive the wrong way? Yes. Did he cause an accident? Yes. But the law, 169.17, makes it clear that law enforcement in the state of Minnesota has a duty and a responsibility to drive with due caution. And what does the Sherburne County Sheriff's Office come out and say automatically? And we know how they operate. I will point to my friend Marcy and the series of videos that we've done and are continuing to plan to do more videos on about her son Spencer, who was killed in a head-on collision. And the Minnesota State Patrol quickly came out and stated the young man that was killed died because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Now, they didn't use those words, but that's what they did. They victim blamed. Minnesota State Patrol, in the case of Spencer, came out and blamed Spencer for being dead because he wasn't wearing his fucking seatbelt. Excuse me. But Sherburne County, not to be outdone by the Minnesota State Patrol, quickly had to rush and get a statement out saying that the trooper was involved in the accident because he was responding to the call of someone driving the wrong way on the highway. but he couldn't stop in time. He didn't have enough time to stop. Now, folks, I want you to understand that this wasn't a light tap that he inflicted on this young man. You see, this young man was airlifted to the hospital that night. This teenager, this high school student, 17 years old, this was in Sherburne County on April 9th at about 9 p.m. This 17-year-old high school student who was involved in a head-on or in a T-bone accident that he did not cause, got out and did the right thing, did the Good Samaritan thing, did the whatever you want to call it, the Christian thing, the moral thing, the ethical thing, the kind thing, the be nice to your neighbor thing. He got out and did what anybody would do, and he checked on the other driver. He checked on the person who caused the accident, and this responding state trooper came on the scene of this accident so damn fast that he could not respond in time to stop. Could not respond in time to avoid the accident. Could not take the ditch. Could not hit the brakes enough to keep this from being serious. And how serious is it? That young man, that 17-year-old student, is still in the hospital, apparently permanently paralyzed if he survives. Every day is a constant battle for this young man. Every day it's surgery after surgery after surgery. It's treatment after treatment, medication after medication. Now, I have inside sources that are telling me that Sherburne County, who has taken over the investigation because, wouldn't want to leave it to the hands of the Minnesota State Patrol, because when you let cops investigate, agencies investigate themselves, they always say, we've investigated ourselves and we found out that we've done nothing wrong. So Sherburne County stepped up to the plate and said, we'll investigate this for you. Apparently, one of the deputies for Sherburne County, now I don't know what his role would be in any of this. I would imagine that the Sherburne County Sheriff would at least have enough lowbrow intelligence to not let him anywhere near the investigation. But apparently, one of the deputies in Sherburne County is related to these children. To the 17-year-old and the 15-year-old. And there has been talk, well, I can't say that. Let's just put it this way. There's some Sherburne County residents are not real happy with people asking questions right now. Yes, Sherburne County. Now, for those of you that haven't been following me for very long, I put out a video a couple of years ago of a lady who Sherburne County, I think it was a chief deputy, physically assaulted a woman. Hey, Tennessee, thanks for being here, Perigo. I don't know these kids personally, no. Most of the stories that I cover, I don't know any of the people when I start covering the stories. But I want people to understand what's happening here. You have a law enforcement agency investigating a law enforcement agency. That they work with on a regular basis. Law enforcement agencies like Sherburne County will work on a regular basis with the Minnesota State Patrol. That's what they do. They work in tandem. They're going to watch out for each other. I look like, thank you. I guess, I don't know. If you could decide that I'm a leftist, what an asinine statement. What's a leftist even look like? I'm not a leftist, by the way. I'm a paleo-libertarian, but, you know, whatever. But see, this is where I was going with this. All of the people, all the back the blue at all cost, all of the bootlickers on the right, and even bootlickers on the left, are coming out and they're saying things about, I've been doing some reading since somebody told me about this story, talking about how it's terribly important that we allow law enforcement to do their job. You know, we just got to allow them to do their job. Now, folks, the problem is that nobody's giving the family any answers as to what actually happened, as to whether or not any of the information that they had from that day is even accurate. Apparently, the state patrol trooper said that he had his lights on. Now, we don't know that for a fact. And I'm waiting for the audio of the scanner. And that, me saying I'm waiting doesn't mean that I'm angry or whatever about it. But those of you who know me know that when I begin to work on a story, someone comes to me with a story and says, hey, can you help me talk about this? Can you help me understand this? Can you help me bring light to this? Can you help me shed some light into this? Because sunlight's a perfect disinfectant. I say, I will work with you. I will help you tell this story, but it's going to take work on your part. I'm not, I'm busy. I work 40 plus hours a week, plus my personal life. And many of you know my personal life means content on the weekend, and I also write. I'm a writer. I'm publishing on Substack. I'm working on several books right now. So, I don't have the time, and I don't have the financial resources to cover everything. So I expect when I'm working with someone that they put the legwork in. And not everybody has a platform, and my platform might be small. I might be under 5,000 views, 5,000 subscribers, but I have other platforms that help tell these stories. Brian from Here's the Deal has picked up some of my content and ran with it. Now, I'm not saying that this trooper is 100% automatically guilty that he wasn't running lights and sirens. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying, which is a very good question that was just asked, is why was the cop going so fast that he couldn't see the accident? And that is precisely what needs to be asked and answered, and not explained away, but explained in a sufficient enough way that we can understand as the wage slave or South Dakota or North Dakota, Washington, D.C., New York State, Washington State, Texas, Florida, Hawaii. It doesn't matter where you're from. Your tax dollars go to support every single law enforcement agency in the United States. People don't believe me when I tell them this, but there is not a single law enforcement agency in the entire country that does not receive wage slave tax dollars from the federal state. From the federal state, every single state agency, every county agency, every municipal agency, every single one of them gets wage slave taxpayer tax cattle dollars from the federal state. And this is why. So that they have to do the bidding of the federal state. When they sign off and they take that money from the federal state, when they get grants, when they get money for funding to do certain types of enforcement, they agree to do whatever the federal executive branch tells them to do. And if they don't do what they're told, then they lose their funding. They lose their access to all the surplus military equipment and whatnot that they all love to play with. And so the question about, why was he going so fast isn't just important to the Minnesota State Patrol. It's not just important to Sherburne County. It's important to every single because this guy benefits from the wage slave tax cattle across the entire United States. And on that night, I could tell you right now, his speeds had to have been so fast that he outdrove his braking distance. He outdrove the distance of his lights. Some of you don't get this because some of you aren't old like me. But my dad used to tell me, do not outdrive your lights. We had to learn that when I was driving, to not outdrive your lights. And with the inception of LED lighting, which of course is incredibly bright, by the way, I think they should be illegal. I don't believe in illegality very often, but LED lights are incredibly dangerous. They're blinding. But the people think that with having these brand new lights and whatnot that are on all the squad cars, that somehow that they have better perception, and they don't. Cops outdrive their lights all the time. And no, folks, that doesn't mean they're going faster than light. It means that they're driving so fast that the distance that they cover in a short period of time is too far for the lights to be effective. And that is what happened in this situation. I can almost guarantee you. He was going too fast for the road. He was going too fast for his lights. He outdrove his lights, and he had this accident, and he mangled this 17-year-old boy. Mangled him. Folks, he's paralyzed. He's goddamn paralyzed. And this trooper was treated and released. Just treated and released. Sitting at home right now, paid administrative leave. While he's being investigated. And you know how they're going to handle this investigation. Sherburne County is going to drag their feet on this. And how they're going to drag their feet on it? Because that's what law enforcement agencies do when they investigate one another. Look at the amount of time that Trooper Shane Roper was under investigation by the Rochester, Minnesota Police Department after he slaughtered Olivia Flores in a situation not too dissimilar. Months that dragged on. Months that went on. That investigation went on forever. But boy, if that had been anybody else, let's just say that had been the wrong way driver. What if it had been the wrong way? This 70-year-old man driving the wrong way. He went head on with this car or T-boned this pickup that they were driving. What if that were the case? What if that's what happened? they would have had him charged already. And there would have been charges no matter what, even if he was dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, or he just got confused. They would have had him charged already. Moonster 420, that is the most asinine thing anybody could ever say. Which brings me to the next thing. There's a whole swath of people out there that are back the blue at all costs. Back the blue line, back the blue family, back the badge, back the blue badge, back the cops, no matter what. And I say, and I teach this to people constantly. Every single person that I talk to that runs into law enforcement, and you're gonna, I know a few of you watching, you're already gonna know exactly what I'm saying. I'm gonna say, it's back the blue until it happens to you. That's a fact. I told you about Marcy. I mentioned Marcy's story and you know where she had been with law enforcement until her son was killed in a head-on, and law enforcement quickly stepped in. Minnesota State Patrol blamed Spencer for dying in an accident that he did not cause because he apparently wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Then I told you, and I asked her, she goes, yeah, I was back to blue. And now she's like, she questions everything the cops do. Then I told you about Pam, Wabasha County, Plainview, Minnesota. Cops forcibly entering her home on the behest of the social services over a false allegation without a warrant. Without a warrant. Cops just pushed their way into her house when she wasn't there without a warrant. I asked Pam, were you back to blue? Are you still back to blue? And she's like, no. And I taught him, back to blue until it happens to you. I will teach this to every single person ever that I talk to. Because what they find out is that when it comes down to who are they loyal to, the blue line family is always loyal to itself. Always loyal to itself. %100 of the time, they're always loyal to one another. You are secondary at best, more than likely tertiary in their consideration. Sherburne County is looking for any way they possibly can to get this trooper out of whatever could be happening to him. They will make excuses. They will blame the victims. And they already have, because what they've done in their press releases has indicated their mindset. One, they led with, the trooper was responding to the 911 call about this wrong way driver, okay? Immediately justification. Look, this trooper was rushing to save you, rushing to serve you, rushing to protect you. Folks, what do you think would have happened if he was driving that goddamn fast that he couldn't swerve off the road or stop in time to avoid an accident? What would have happened if he came upon that wrong way driver? Just think about that. What would have happened? So they're already building the narrative. Here's this trooper rushing to save you, rushing to stop this horrible person who's driving the wrong way down the road. There's a very good chance he would have hit that guy without hitting anybody else. Probably could have killed him. And then they had to release the information that it looks like several of the victims of the accident were out walking around. And what's that matter? What does it matter that they were out walking around, that they were out of their vehicles? Were they obligated to stay in their vehicle after an accident? Is there some sort of obligation that says you have to stay in your vehicle after you've been involved in an accident? No. So why is that important? Now, you ask me, all that does is it makes it more damning for the trooper. But what they're really doing is they're building a narrative. They are building a narrative where they're saying it's not the trooper's fault. The trooper was doing his job, and it can't be helped that these people got hurt while the trooper was doing his job, and therefore we have to blame the trooper. We have to blame this trooper, this Minnesota State Patrol hero, who is just out there trying to save lives as he comes careening into an accident at a speed way too fast to be able to swerve around the accident or stop in time to prevent further injuries. That's what we're hearing. That's what they're doing. The law enforcement world in Sherburne County, between the Minnesota State Patrol and the Sherburne County Sheriff's Office, they're building a narrative. They're building a narrative to give the trooper an out and to blame the victims. Just like Trooper Shane Roper is blaming his victim that he killed. But he's going further and he's blaming the driver of the victim. That's not a bad point, you know. I should say think more than I do believe, but I do say things like think about it. And here's something else that we should all speculate on. This is what we should speculate about and think about. Shouldn't really speculate, but we should think about what we know. If you pay any attention to law enforcement, especially State Patrol, as you're driving around, when you see them, they're always on their computers, even when they're driving. Every single trooper that I see driving down a highway, driving down the freeway, or on a surface road in a metro area, they're always on a computer. Always on a computer. Well, I mean, I could have been saying I believe. I don't know. Sometimes I don't always know what I'm saying. I'm kidding. I always know what I'm saying. I just sometimes use words interchangeably. And that's the other thing, the question, why do taxpayers foot the bill for when an officer breaks the law? Well, it's qualified immunity. And Jesse, I have some thoughts on that, actually. Some very strong thoughts on qualified immunity. My friend KD is watching. He knows how I feel about this. So when I was hounded out of my career, Sandra, I appreciate that you would dread seeing people out walking around, but it's a natural reaction for people who give a damn about their neighbors on an accident to get out and check on the person in the other car. I am trauma trained. I was a combat lifesaver in the military. I spent nearly 13 years as a deputy in Olmsted County, and before I was pushed out for ostensibly being a COVID whistleblower about the garbage that was happening in the state of Minnesota and across the United States, and they attacked me and pushed me out of my career field for having a podcast, I was trained in medical and trauma aid there as well. So I know, so when I come upon an accident or when I am involved in an accident, my first response is to get out and render aid as the first person on scene. And many states have Good Samaritan laws that say you must render aid. Now, what I am certain that we're going to reach a reasonable conclusion on is that they're building a case to keep the trooper not only on the job, but to keep qualified immunity attached for him. Now, every single law enforcement officer is automatically granted qualified immunity in the state of Minnesota. It is on the, people need to understand, qualified immunity does not affect criminal charges. It only affects civil liability. I am convinced that what they're working towards is to keep him not only on the job, but to keep his qualified immunity attached. And that's what this is all about. As they drag their feet in this investigation, they are working incredibly hard to justify the bad action of the state trooper so that he doesn't have to worry about being on the hook for civil damages if there's litigation. Now, when I was pushed out of my career for having a podcast that my former sheriff didn't like, I chose to sign an agreement in that said I would not sue the county. I would not sue the sheriff's office. And at the time, it was because I said the taxpayer shouldn't be on the hook. But as long as qualified immunity exists, and as long as the Back the Blue crowd, both on the left and on the right, as long as those crowds exist and they demand that we all bow down and suck on blue shoe leather, as long as they're all out there, then they should be on the hook for the bad acts of every single cop that they back, no matter what. You don't have to like that I'm saying that, but here's what's eventually going to happen. Sooner or later, right, that's what I say all the time, back the blue until it happens to you. Sooner or later, these agencies are going to lose bonding. They're going to lose insurance. So basically what covers agencies in qualified immunity. And by the way, every single person that works in the public sector has some form of qualified immunity. Every single one of them. It's just we talk about it with cops and never with anybody else. But sooner or later, every single one of these agencies that is losing qualified immunity cases and the taxpayers are on the hook to end up paying that, these bonding agencies are going to stop insuring law enforcement agencies and say you're on your own from now on. And that means the taxpayers really will have to start seeing the actual bills for the qualified immunity cases that are now coming up more and more often. And if you want to learn a lot about qualified immunity and how it's being fought across the U.S., listen to Bound by Oath by the Institute for Justice. Once again, Bound by Oath by the Institute for Justice. It's a phenomenal podcast, and they've got several seasons, and they spend a lot of time talking about qualified immunity. So, until we can get legislative bodies in every state to pass legislation that says no more qualified immunity for anyone, then every single taxpayer should be on the hook for every bad act of every single cop who is granted qualified immunity. And that's what people need to understand is just because a cop is granted qualified immunity doesn't mean that the agency isn't going to pay out in the lawsuit. It just means that the cop is not on the hook for it. So if they were to take qualified immunity away and require that every single person in law enforcement had to get their own bonding, it would change how cops behave. It would change what cops do. You live in Minneapolis, and law enforcement there is nearly non-existent. That's patently untrue. No more qualified immunity for chat room moderators. None of my chat room moderators have qualified immunity. They have to cover their own insurance. They need to cover their own legal suits. That's why AVA is very, very careful with what he does. Folks, this family, these young boys, the 17-year-old, his life is forever changed by this situation. The trooper's gonna, unless Sherburne County really, surprises the hell out of me, which I don't think they will. I am predicting right now that Sherburne County is gonna find that the trooper did nothing wrong and that we're never gonna get our hands on the dash cam video. I'm pretty sure we won't. Because a lot of times, unless there's criminal charges, they don't have to release that stuff in Minnesota. I'm hoping that we can get this guy's history. I have had some people already report to me that this trooper is kind of an asshole and nobody likes him. But what you don't understand about the law enforcement world is even the assholes that aren't liked by anybody are protected by the people who don't like the asshole. Because once again, they don't want to be seen as not being a part of the team. We make a lot of comments about criminals talking about you don't snitch because snitches get stitches. Cops are the same way. That's why they came after me for being a COVID whistleblower. That's why they forced me out of my career. I didn't violate any agency policies. I didn't break any laws. They accused me of it. They attacked me as if I were a criminal. They tried to say I was going to be charged criminally, but they couldn't because I didn't do anything criminal. It was all because I refused to bow down during COVID and became a whistleblower of sorts, and that's why they came after me. And that's what they do. The reality is that cops are more loyal to each other than they are to their oaths. They don't care about their oaths as long as they don't get accused of being a snitch. I would say less than 5% of the people who are still in law enforcement after 2020, 2021, and 2022 have a spine. And anyone entering into law enforcement as a career field since then is nothing but a rule-following, already oath breaker. And now we have a family in Sherburne County with a 17-year-old young man who's probably never going to see justice. Because Sherburne County is already running interference for him, for the trooper. They're already building a narrative that everybody else was wrong except for him. Threshold moment. I called out law enforcement and government agencies for being willing to enforce stay-at-home orders and lockdown orders, and started telling people to not comply with mask mandates, and was telling people that when I actually predicted the jab mandates, and I told people that you should not comply with any of that. I called out a city attorney in the city of Albert Lea and the chief of police for colluding to prosecute a business owner over there who in Albert Lea, Minnesota, who ended up being imprisoned for 90 days for keeping her little bistro open during the second round of lockdowns. And they came after me for doing commentary on that. No, doing commentary on that before she went to prison, before she was in prison for that, doing commentary showing how they had used some illegal methods against her, like using a panic button to get her out of a building when they knew there was no emergency. I called it out. So, threshold moment, if you'd like to know more, you can send me an email, mbrr podcast at yahoo.com. I'd be happy to email with you, mbrr podcast at yahoo.com. My focus today is getting people to understand that we're covering the story in Sherburne County, and we won't stop talking about it until we get some sort of answers, even if it's not the answers we want. We're going to talk until we get an answer of some sort. Yes, I've never taken the jab, ever. I would have been terminated. I would have been terminated if they hadn't tried to force me out anyway, because they threatened everybody's job, and then everybody who asked me what do we do, they all caved in and took the jab because they didn't want to run the risk of losing their careers. This trooper, Sean Moses, I don't know how to say it. This trooper almost killed these people. And he's sitting at home, paid administrative leave, for however many months it takes. And it's already been almost a month that this accident happened. He's going to sit at home and he's going to continue to draw a wage slave tax cattle paycheck. And this 17-year-old's probably never going to walk again. But we're supposed to lift up our thoughts and prayers for everyone involved. I don't care about the trooper. I hope he never works again. I hope his life is ruined, because he's already ruined at least one. And if he's not taken care of now, he will ruin hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more. So thanks everybody for tuning in. If you've not subscribed yet, I hope you do. If you like the channel, I hope you will join and become a channel member. I will be doing my best to stay on top of this story. And I will release what I can, when I can, as I can. If I know anything about cops, they're like ice. They don't care. Not many of us had hearts. And I worked inside of a detention center every day for almost 13 years. And I saw how heartless people could be. So I'm going to go, folks. Going to go make myself some dinner. And try and enjoy a little bit of my evening. Maybe do some writing. You can check me out on Substack. If you'd like to support the work, join as a channel member here. Join as a channel member on Rumble, or join as a supporter at Subscribestar, or send super chats. And I hope you guys will share this out and help me bring attention to this story. Thank you so much. Till next time, my friends, fight for your freedom, it is yours. Fight for your liberty, it belongs to you. And Sic Semper, Tyrannis.